We had about 16 people. We had about 20 that started, but about 16 made it all the way through our Pain to Purpose course this last week, and they completed that. So I wonder if you just join me in just giving them a round of applause. And yeah, we're not going to have them stand. That's not nice. Hey, would you stand and just share your deepest pain? No. So, but yeah, no, really, we're very proud of you as a group because it takes a lot to start to face those things. And I know that for many of you, it was just the beginning of a journey, and for some of you, it's a little further down the journey. But I know that a lot after just talking with a lot of you, everybody kind of got something from it and is continuing to work through that. So really proud of you guys as a church. And again, we'll be offering that in the spring, and no save the dates yet, but I will give you a date for that here at the beginning of the year. So excited to be able to offer that again. Well, we have been, if you're just joining with us, this is actually the last talk in a group of talks. We've been going through the book of Luke together, and we've been looking at, specifically in Luke, where Jesus shares table fellowship with people. And so we're going to be in Luke chapter 24 today. So if you've got the scriptures, you want to follow along with us, we're going to be in Luke chapter 24. And I just want you to imagine for a second that you're a kid. Everybody with me? Everybody got some picture in their mind of themselves as a kid. And you're living in this house with these parents, but they just don't feel like your parents. You know what I mean? They're not nice to you. They hide you away when other people come over. It's very weird, right? And you about 8, you start to think something is up, okay, with these people. I don't know about these people. And your siblings are mean to you. Everybody's just kind of mean. So one day you go up into the attic and you see this box up there that you've never noticed before. You open the box and you realize that your parents, your real parents, are actually still alive, that they're doctors, which of course you always knew, all the science fair ribbons that you've hidden in your room, that they're actually these great people, that they're still alive, and you find a way to reach out to them, right? You think, finally, this is it. This is the moment. My real parents are going to come. They're going to pick me up, and I'm going to be out of this situation. And on the way for them to pick you up, they have a car accident, and they both die. And now you are certain that you are stuck with the fake parents and that your fate is sealed. Do you feel how disappointing this story is? This is not a kid's story. You with me? It's at least the beginning of a kid's story, maybe, but certainly not the end of one. And I think that this gets at just how disappointed these disciples are feeling in Luke chapter 24. The people of God, the Jewish people, had been just waiting for rescue. They had kind of had it up to here with all the different empires ruling over them. I mean, it was, first it was the Babylonians, but their scripture kind of showed them that they earned that one. But then there was the Persians, right? And then God just kept extending their exile, and then they came back and they rebuilt the temple, but it just wasn't the same as the other ones. And just one thing after another, it was Persia, then Greece, and now Rome, the worst of them all, it seemed. And they were just desperate to be rescued in some way. And they thought, maybe this guy Jesus, maybe this is him. He is those parents that we've been waiting for. He's going to come, and then all of a sudden, that guy gets crucified. That is so disappointing. Can you imagine? And so that's just the space we find ourselves in this morning. It's this in-between space. And we're going to read a story this morning of, got to be one of the most understated ways to prove that you're resurrected from the dead. It's got to be. Can you imagine if you resurrected from the dead, where you might show up? I'm just guessing for most of us, it's not going to be like this. This is very weird. So this is the story, okay? This is in Luke chapter 24. We're going to start in verse 10. What's happened already in Luke chapter 24 is that Jesus, it's Resurrection Sunday. And he's already appeared to some people. But later that same day, there was two disciples. They were just walking on the way to a village called Emmaus, which is about 7 miles from Jerusalem. So it's a long walk, a long, disappointing walk. And they were discussing everything that had happened. Now, it's interesting, they were at Emmaus. Now, you may not know this about Emmaus, but Emmaus was wasn't just a Bible college in Dubuque, Iowa. It was, I know some of you have driven past it before, some of you are a little more familiar with it, but it was actually a military place of power. It was a place where a famous battle had happened and the Jewish people had won. It was kind of like a Gettysburg or something, except if you were the North, not the South. Except it was more like decisive victory than that one. And it was a place where the Jewish people often gathered to kind of like lick their wounds and sort of regain composure to come against the dynasty again, to come against the empire, right? It's kind of like when you go to some place in your brain where it's like the glory days. You know what I'm talking about? You guys know that old baseball song? It's like glory days. You guys know this one? You with me? Some of you are baseball fans. Yeah, Glory Days. That's the name of the song. You'll look it up later. Okay. Anyways, the clicker has stopped working. I'm sorry, Nathan. Just decided, that's it. So we got to go to the next slide. Here we go. So this will happen to me sometimes. Some of you know this. These are vegetables. Some of you know this about me, but this is from something called VeggieTales. If you're not familiar with this, they're vegetables that tell people Bible stories. When I was 19, I was the big tall one in the middle. That's Larry the Cucumber in the VeggieTales Live. And let me just tell you, there was a moment that happened. We were in Houston at a church that seated 5,000, 2 sold-out shows in a row. And the Backstreet Boys at the Sphere have nothing on the VeggieTales in the early thousands, okay? It's unbelievable feeling, but when I walked onto the stage, there was an audible gasp because children's theater, kids are not quiet, right? They just got so excited that it was like that. Just 5,000 of them, right? So it's kind of an amazing feeling. And sometimes, when things get like a little depressing, a little hard, I go back to these joy moments. You guys with me? You guys have some of these. This is actually good, healthy stuff that we need. We have to have some memories that we return to for joy. But the struggle with these is they can become a form of escapism, right? Sometimes we end up turns out you can finish Netflix when you're depressed, It's very hard, but you can do it. You can make it so that there's nothing new on Netflix. Incredible. Yeah, you guys know this, right? Everybody has autoplay. You can scroll endlessly on your phone, trying to just numb the disappointment. I think that's what's going on here. I think these people are heading back to a place where they've known they've had some victories before because they just can't understand this new thing. And so, as they're walking along, now it's working again apparently, magic. They were discussing and arguing, and Jesus himself came near, and he began to walk along with them. They were prevented from recognizing him, which, don't you just love that? It's very sneaky Jesus here. And then he asked him, hey, what are you guys talking about as you're walking? And they stopped walking, and they looked discouraged. They're like, man. And then the one named Cleopas is like, are you the only visitor to Jerusalem that doesn't know about these things that have happened? In other words, have you been living under a rock? And Jesus is like, I got a story for you. That's a Bible joke, and if you didn't get that, it's okay. Jesus has been in a tomb, and there was a rock in front of it. But Jesus plays dumb. That's fascinating. What's going on? Tell me about it. What things, Jesus says, I love this. So they told him, listen, it's all the things concerning Jesus of Nazareth. He was a prophet. He was powerful in action and speech before God and people. And our chief priests and leaders, they handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. They cut the brakes on the Redeemer that we thought was going to be the one. And we were hoping he was going to redeem all of Israel. And besides this, on the third day, it's the third day since these things happened. And moreover, there's some women in the group that astounded us. They arrived early to the tomb, and they didn't find his body. And they came and they reported they had seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. And some of those who were there, they went to the tomb, and they found it just as the women had said, but they didn't see him. In other words, there's some conflicting reports here, and even if he is alive, what does that mean? That's weird. So let's just get out of here. Let's go where we know some stuff, you know? This is confusing. And he said to them, this is where it gets confrontational and a little bit more ancient Near Eastern, okay? You ever been in the Middle East? People love to argue. It's like their love language, you know? It is, I'm serious. And he says, how foolish you are, and slow to believe all the prophets have spoken. Wasn't it necessary for the Messiah to suffer these things and enter his glory? And then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted from them all the things concerning himself in the scriptures. This is when the author of the book gives an explanation of all the allusions that are in the book as they were meant to be written. That's a pretty fascinating Bible study. Anybody with me? Yeah, apparently he was able to do it in only 7 miles. So here we go. You guys ready? I think he started with Genesis, and he said, don't you remember how there was going to be somebody that was going to crush the head of the snake, but somehow that snake was going to bruise his heel? And don't you remember that Jesus even said while he was in Jerusalem that no sign would be given except for that he was going to be like the bronze snake that was lifted up in the wilderness, and that the very thing that would cause the wrath that was biting the Israelites they would look upon this thing was lifted up, and that somehow that would bring about the salvation of them? Don't you remember that at the rock at Meribah when you guys were so thirsty in the wilderness, and I said, let's have a court session, and we'll have all the elders stand before God, and I'll actually take the strike so that I can provide living water for you guys in the wilderness? Don't you remember that? Don't you remember that? Yeah, that the government would be upon the shoulders of this child that would be born from Isaiah, but don't you also remember that he was a suffering servant, and that by his wounds we would be healed? Do you remember these things? You remember that there was going to be a king that was going to one day rule forever on the throne of David. And that I made this promise to David. And how do you think a king is going to rule forever unless he's alive forever? In fact, the Messiah had to suffer these things. And they just weren't sure. I don't think they were real sure what to make of this. So let's go to the next slide, Nathan. Please. There we go. I forgot to say please. They came near a village where they were going, and it gave the impression that he was going further. I love this. Jesus plays stupid, but he also is given the impression that I have other places to be, so it's been really good for you. And they're like, hey, stay with us. Don't you? I mean, isn't this fascinating? This guy has just resurrected from the dead, so he appears to two people that are just walking. Could have been a man and wife, could have been two dudes, we don't know. It's two disciples, they're on the way back to Emmaus, and he just appears to them and starts giving them this like Bible study on the way back where they're going, and then he pretends like he's got other places to be. Like, I'm just gonna get, and they're like, no, stay with us, it's almost evening. Now the day is almost over, so he went and he stayed with them. It was as he reclined at the table with them, he took the bread. Now here's what you need to know. This is not the guest's job to take the bread, okay? That's the host's job. The host is the one who takes the bread and blesses it. You know, You ever invite somebody over to your house and you're like, why don't you go ahead and pray for us? It just feels awkward, right? It's like, thanks for coming. I'd like for you to bless the meal now. Like, I don't even know if it's going to be good. So just there's an older man that gave me this like very wise trick with when you're going over to somebody's house and you're about to eat a meal. What you say before they ask you is it good, you say, this looks amazing before you eat anything. You're welcome. That's just a free thing that has nothing to do with the talk, but I just felt like it was important for you to know that. So Jesus, he takes this bread, he blesses it, he breaks it, he gives it to them. It says, then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. But then he disappeared. I can't make this up. This is the Bible, people. And they said to each other, weren't our hearts burning within us while he was talking with us on the road, explaining the scriptures to us? So here's the point. Jesus joins you on your journey, and he opens your eyes to his victory. Here's my sense as I was just praying through this, is that many of you feel like you have given the Jesus stuff a try, and it's been found wanting in some ways, you know? It's been a little like sticky. You feel a little uncomfortable about it even now because the pastor's not supposed to say these things, you know? Then it starts to feel like maybe I'm not eating what I'm selling, you know? And that's kind of scary. Nobody wants that. But Jesus, here's the thing, is that Jesus will never let you down. We sing songs like that. There's scriptures that talk about these things. We talked about the goodness of God. All our life, he's been faithful. That does not mean that there aren't moments in our humanity when we don't just get really disillusioned with the way he goes about things. Are you with me? It gets pretty disappointing sometimes, the way he deals with stuff. I mean, yeah, we got scripture verses that we can say, oh, yeah, well, God's ways are not like our ways. But what that means practically is that there's going to be a lot of times where we're like, I have no idea what's happening. It's like, you know, we thought it was going to be like this, and that he was going to redeem Israel. He was finally going to rescue us. And then some of the women in the group went, and he wasn't even there, and they said they saw an angel. And then some of the guys in our group the trustworthy ones, and they said that it was basically what the women said, but they didn't see him. So we don't know. How is he going to redeem Israel now if he's a ghost? Is he going to bring the angels? What's happening? What's happening? We don't know. See, the problem is that these disciples of Jesus, they misunderstood the victory of Jesus. They misunderstood. It's a common thing. It happens. See, sometimes well-meaning preachers, we say things like, you know, God will never let you down, and he's always with you. And we say these things because they are true, okay? But if you're not careful, you'll start to build a story in your head about the way Jesus' victory works. And it essentially looks like my life with Jesus, kind of like this. Up and to the right, a steady rise, you know? Something you can post about it on Instagram every day. You with me? That's how it's supposed to look. There's just a few problems with that. Jesus' teaching is a good start. Jesus promises that there will be trouble. Jesus actually gives us a model for how we live our lives, and I don't know if you remember how the story of Jesus goes in the middle, but it's not super great, okay? It truly is an act of God that 2,000 years later, here we are, bunch of Midwesterners in a room talking about a carpenter's kid from Nazareth, Israel, who had 12 close followers that all bailed as soon as he was going to be on the cross. except for the one, John, who took care of his mom, the disciple who Jesus loved. But everybody else, one of them ran away naked just to get out of there. He left his cloak. And the one who Jesus says, oh, this rock, I'm going to build my church. That one, there was a little girl that was like, hey, weren't you with Jesus? He's like, it wasn't me. I'm definitely not with Jesus. I don't know what you're talking about. I do not know that guy. Everybody misunderstood him. He died very lonely in a very public way, executed on the cross. And so we need him to open our eyes to his victory. We just do. This is what I love about Jesus, is that he shows up on our journey, in our despair, and he's like, hey, what you thinking about? What you talking about? And we're like, haven't you heard about this stuff? He's like, no, tell me about it. What is it? Jesus plays dumb. He invites us into a conversation with him. But then he starts to teach us about the nature of his victory. And how really, truly, when you seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, everything else will be added unto you. But it doesn't work the way we think it does. He starts to teach us that in this life, we will have trouble, but we don't have to fear because he's overcome the world. The promise of following Jesus is not that, hey, after you give your life to Jesus, everything's up and to the right. The promise is that Jesus is with us in the midst of all that. And he comes right alongside us. He begins to teach us just very carefully about himself in our journey. What an understated way to announce your resurrection to people. Just think about it. Jesus could have showed up with all the heavenly hosts. I mean, he's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. One day he's going to be on a white horse, and it's going to look like the lamb that was slain. He's got a sword in his mouth and all kinds of other weird stuff from Revelation, which you guys can't wait till we preach on that, I bet. You're just dying for it, but it may not ever happen. Anyways, the point is that he could have come like that and showed up to his disciples, right, with all the heavenly hosts. Can you imagine? It's like, hey, guys, I'm back, baby. I'm here. That's not how he shows up. He's just like, hey, what are you guys talking about? It's just so strange. I think that Luke is giving us a window into how Jesus still works. He kind of joins us, teaches us, reframes things for us. That very hour, they got up, they returned to Jerusalem. They got out of there. They went back to Jerusalem in the dark. That's dangerous. But there was like an urgency now to getting back to Jerusalem. You and I think they had a little skip in their step too, because after seeing the risen Jesus, all kinds of endorphins, you get back to Jerusalem in a hurry. We think that the walk toward Emmaus took a long time, but getting back to Jerusalem was a little quicker. And they said, the Lord has truly been raised, has appeared to Simon. They began to describe what had happened on the road and how he had made known to them by the breaking of the bread. That's what all that means. So now what? What do we do with all this, right? What does all this look like for us? Here's what I want to say. Confess your doubts, people. Jesus is just not afraid of your misunderstanding of his victory. In fact, he is inviting you into a conversation today. Sometimes we think of confession as only when we know that we've done wrong things, we say those things to Jesus. And I think that's good, We need to do that. But I just want to say confession is also just truth-telling to Jesus. This is what I'm experiencing as the truth right now, Jesus. I'd like to have a conversation about this. I am going through something that just does not feel right to me. It doesn't feel fair. This is how I'm experiencing things. I thought that when I was going to follow you, this was going to be different. This was going to work out differently than this. You know, I remember one conversation that I had with Jesus where I said, I think you tricked me into coming here. Yeah, because I thought this was about something else, but actually it was something you were going to work out in my character, and I don't like that very much. Sometimes I wish you wouldn't have called me to do that. I'm certain you called me to do it, but it wasn't for what I thought it was. That was tricky. Confess your doubts. We got to learn how to be honest with Jesus. We've talked about this before, but it just bears repeating. Jesus is so real that the only place he can't work is in a fantasy. And guys, we are so deceptive with ourselves. We think that what Jesus wants of us is for us to do the pretend thing where we're really happy with Jesus. We're so happy with you, Jesus. But inside we're no, not happy with Jesus. It's you don't think God can see that? Come on. He is constantly seeking us out so that we can begin to really talk to him about the real things in our lives and the disappointments that we have. He wants a real relationship with us, not some kind of weird platitude thing. Jesus is real. So you confess your doubts to him. The second thing is this: get curious. Ask questions. Expect answers. Get curious with Jesus. Just don't be surprised if he says, how foolish you have been. Did you not see how these things worked out in the scriptures? Listen, being confronted by somebody that loves you, that's trying to get you back on the right path, it is very loving. But it feels awkward. But if you are honest with Jesus about your doubts and you ask real questions and you expect real answers from Jesus, man, it is powerful what the Spirit might reveal to you in those times. So get curious with Jesus. Lastly, this: prepare for news stories. See, these disciples, they thought they were living in one reality. And the reality was, we are waiting on that guy who's going to come, that's going to rescue us from this oppression that we're in. And he's going to come with all the military force of all the heavenly host, and he's going to knock out these people so we don't have to pay these stupid taxes anymore. Amen. You guys with me? That's what the Jews, that's what they were living in. That was the story that they had. But when this Jesus came, and he began to tell a different story about his victory, it began to reframe their own story. All of a sudden, instead of having to go back to Emmaus to kind of lick their wounds, to kind of remember that time when they were victorious, all of a sudden they actually were victorious already. And they could go right back to the scene of the crime that very evening. Right back to a bunch of hidden, scared disciples that were all hiding in different places, didn't know what to do. And that's what happens when we encounter the risen Jesus, when he takes our lives in his hands and he blesses them and he breaks them and he begins to give them away. Then all of a sudden, we're not living in the same story that we once were in. There's a new reality that comes from knowing this risen Jesus. It reframes every single thing in your life. It puts you into a family with a bunch of people from all over the world. It gives you a sense of belonging. You're seen by Jesus. You're safe with him. You have the security of knowing that because it's always about him holding up his end of the bargain, that you know that you are secure in the love of Jesus, that nothing can separate you from the love of Jesus. Nothing. Nor height, nor depth. Nothing's going to separate you from the love of God. And when you know that, you can begin to see that all of this life that we live, all of the goodness, all of the amazing things that we get to experience, all of the hardships, it's all temporary. This is not it. And when we let the future hope of being with Jesus and all his people forever invade our present reality, it just changes our story. We're in a different story now. Now, all of a sudden, all the things that happen to us, now somehow they might be used in some powerful way for redemptive purposes that we never could see. All of a sudden, what you thought was a long and lonely walk of disappointment actually becomes the valley of the shadow of death that God meets you in and teaches you something beautiful about. And when your eyes are open to that reality, you can run back and get right into his redemptive mission.